This week on the Destination Angler.
They come back because the fish are solid 19, 20 inchers. They're very aggressive in the way that they attack a fly, whether it's a dry fly or a beadhead nymph or a streamer. They break 1X tippet, 2X tippet like it's kite string.
Oh, man.
It is a river that I fished all over the world, and this is the river that has always attracted me, and it's always the river that I compare other rivers to.
Welcome to the Destination Angler Podcast, the podcast for anglers who travel. And I'm your host, Steve Haig. We go right to the source, the local guides and experts, to build your knowledge of top fishing locations around North America. It's a big world out there. Now go and fish it.
I'm going away for a while, but I'll be back soon. Whoa, whoa.
Hey anglers, welcome back to another episode of the Destination Angler, brought to you by Trout Routes, the #1 fishing app, helping you find new trout waters so you spend less time on the road and more time doing what you love, trout fishing. Get all the public access regulations and stream data you need for your next trip right at your fingertips. And by Anglers Coffee, perfecting the coffee experience for the fly fishing community and anglers everywhere with small batch coffee delivered to your doorstep. It's darn near perfect. Coming up on the Destination Angler, we're taking a trip down south to Belize for some of the finest permit fishing in the world. Then we're headed to western North Carolina and the famous Davidson River for trophy trout, southern style. And be sure to backcast to catch the last episode of the Destination Angler on the Alpine Lakes of Central Idaho with John Heckel, Idaho Fish and Game. You won't want to miss these shows. A big thank you for all you folks out there for listening and spreading the word about the Destination Angler. And today our destination is the legendary North Fork of the Shoshone River, and our guest is expert fly angler, guide, and outfitter Tim Wade, owner of North Fork Anglers in historic Cody, Wyoming. The North Fork starts in the Absaroka Wilderness bordering Yellowstone National Park and flows through some of the prettiest scenery in the West. Rated as a top 10 river to fly fish in the northern Rockies, this freestone stream is known for prolific hatches and large, hard-fighting trout, averaging 16 to 18 inches. Sounds amazing, right? But let me tell you, the Shoshone is not for the faint of heart. The wading here can be tough, and you're going to need to bust out that 1 or 2X tippet, that's right, 1 or 2X, to land these bad boys. Plus, this is Grizzly country, so it pays to keep your head on a swivel. It's a real treat to have Tim on the show today. In addition to being one heck of a nice guy, he's an Umpqua Signature tyer and owns the longest-running fly fishing outfitter in the state, in operation since 1984. Tim has been featured in ESPN'S Fly Fishing America, TNN Outdoors, Trout TV, Fly Fisherman Magazine, Orvis News, several radio and TV shows, and writes a weekly column for the Cody newspaper. Today, Tim dials us into this incredible fishery and shares stories of Buffalo Bill Cody, life growing up in a fly fishing family, wildlife encounters, and an update after the big flood this spring. Be sure to stick around to the end for a great rundown on top hatches and Tim's must-have fly patterns. Well, Tim, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Steve. It's good to be on your show.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you. And I'm just kind of curious. I wonder if you could just give us a quick update on all those floods in the spring and how that kind of affected some of the rivers that are in your neck of the woods.
Well, let's just say that in pre-recorded history, recorded history, we've never had a flood like that since the migration west occurred. So it was an unusual event. It brought a lot of heavy rains, about 4 inches of rain on top of 4 feet of new snow, and we had a warm spell. That's why it rained instead of snowed. So this melt and rain started at about 12,500 feet and ran downhill from there. And as it went downhill, it just started to scour and move debris and rocks and trees and things aside. And it devastated the Yellowstone River in Montana. It did a good job of devastating the Clark's Fork of the Yellowstone, particularly in the wild and scenic canyon portion. And then we have the North Fork of the Shoshone, the South Fork of the Shoshone, the Grable River, all had some damage, only by scouring some of the insect populations that we normally see later in the year. We haven't seen those. We didn't know that at the time. The fishing was good everywhere except in the Clark's Fork, the lower Clark's Fork particularly, after it leaves the canyon. And then also parts of Montana were impacted by that too. So it's got a fairly wide swath through the landscape of northwest Montana or Wyoming and southwest Montana. And we think that given the nature of freestone rivers and streams, it's not the first time they've had floods. And so nature and God has figured out a way to make that all stay beautiful and rehabilitate itself fairly naturally. And so we're expecting things to come back in the next year or two. It'll take a couple of years really to get the hatches reestablished, but we're already seeing fish move back into those devastated areas. And as they reproduce and their fry grow up and they'll reproduce, and we'll see the numbers come back fairly quickly. So we're optimistic that it was a one-time event. We hope to not see this again for another 500 years. And
Right.
we'll see the fishing, like I said, everybody will see it like it used to be. We might see some short-term sedimentation events as, the land heals itself, because the terrain is rugged. It's not rounded hills and it's not flat here. So, we've had some after effects that way with the summer monsoon seasons that come into the Rockies and July and August. So we do see some of that residual effect, but hopefully again that's behind us and we can see the river heal and come back.
Good. With these massive floods, have you seen, areas of the river that you've known well for years, like big rocks that have moved and, new channels? What have you seen?
Well, it was most remarkable, Steve, in the Clark's Fork of the Yellowstone. That is a wild and scenic river. And the canyon section is just a big rip in the earth's crust between the Beartooth Mountains and the Absaroka, what we call the volcanic range that separates Yellowstone Park from the rest of our state. And the water really rolled through there. There was a primitive two-track that used to go up into the canyon that you could access for on four-wheel drive vehicles and SUVs and things like that, and ATVs, and that is totally gone. The road is gone. All of these big, large, long, lakey, flat areas that we used to fish in the evenings for dry flies, those are completely gone, restructured. The river is still trying to find out where it's going to go, and it's deep
Huh.
pools still, but it's moved a half a mile away from where it used to be in some places. In some places, it looks similar to what it was. We just have either smaller rocks or bigger rocks in place of the ones that were there. But it's high water comes through there every year. This year, we just had an abnormally high amount of water that came through in a very short period. So
Yeah.
that'll all change. The river will come back and it'll move around some more. But that's what makes freestone rivers interesting in the Rockies, is they change every year. So you're trying to relearn a fishery, reestablish where the trout are going to be holding, where they were the last couple of years. If you have a high water event, those may be gone, but they've moved over 100 yards or 50 feet, and everything is still there. Bugs, trout. It's just, it's just something that's dynamic, and one of the reasons I like this part of the country so well.
Well, speaking of this part of the country, let's talk about the Shoshone for a minute. Here's some words that I found that describe the Shoshone: beautiful, intense, incredible, formidable, diverse, gnarly, and I love this one, full of grizzlies. It's all true?
All true. Right. All true. Particularly the last part. Yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah, we have a lot of grizzlies on the North Fork. Yeah, I mean bears. It's not grizzly trees. It's not grizzly bushes. It's grizzly bears.
We're talking bears here.
Yeah.
What do you do like with your clients if you know you're going to encounter some grizzlies?
That's a great question. We hear this all the time in North Fork anglers in downtown Cody. Guys come in and they want to know about the bears, and we tell them they're there. and they need to be bear aware. They need to be very careful about how they tread in the wilderness. And we carry bear spray, of course. We recommend that. It's against the law to shoot a grizzly bear deliberately. And I'm pretty sure that we don't have a lot of wild bill hickox and Buffalo Bill Cody type individuals out there fishing. And if they're packing a firearm, I can tell you from backcountry experience, and you're not quick enough to get that out of your holster. A bear spray just covers so much area, and it puts out a very toxic cloud of pepper spray that if it's blowing in your face, you'll hack and gag right along with a grizzly bear. But it is a good deterrent, and we do recommend that as your first measure of defense. The other one is to not fish alone. You want to be with other people. If you are alone, you just have to be even more cautious and make a lot of noise. I tell guys to whistle, yell. If you can't carry a tune, it doesn't matter. Just make a lot of noise and give those bears plenty of time for you.
They don't care.
For them to get out of your way, and for you to keep a sharp eye on underbrush and things that are, willows, places where bears can migrate or come down the corridor. You've just got to be looking around. You can't just be focused entirely on your indicator or your dry fly or, casting and fishing. You've really got to pay attention. And that's probably the biggest piece of advice I could give to anybody that's in grizzly bear country. This includes Yellowstone National Park, West Yellowstone, Montana, parts of Idaho as well.
Sure.
If you're in grizzly bear country, they're the dominant 900-pound gorilla, and you're just a nuisance, and they'd have no qualms batting you out of the way to go down the trail or turn around and go back up the trail. So
yeah,
just be prepared.
Tim, have you had to empty your bear spray can on a grizzly bear before?
I've been very fortunate that way. I have had to pull it out many a time, but we have called the bluff of the bear. I've only sprayed one bear one time, and that was in the thoroughfare country. And it's just because I had a dog with me, and we were going down the trail. The dog got a little goofy, and I thought it was probably a moose coming down the trail. And but I did get my bear spray out. The bear came around the corner. I popped the top and sprayed it. And it, fortunately for me and my dog, turned around and ran off. And also, fortunately, we didn't have a prevailing 10 to 15 mile an hour wind coming down the river like it usually does.
Right.
And so I got the bear first and didn't have to really inhale any of that irritating capsicum.
Yeah, I'll say. And the bear just turned around and left? I mean, what was the reaction of the bear?
He wheeled and left the country, and which is fine with me. That's the whole point of carrying the bear spray, is to get the bear to go away quickly, and you don't suffer any ill effects either way afterward. So,
man, well, I'm glad you're okay. Glad you made it through that one.
Yeah. My dog was a little nervous. She was behind me, not in front of me. So don't think your dog's going to protect you if you're out there by yourself. Your dog is probably going to be running away while you're standing there trying to look big and intimidating to a bear.
Right. I've heard that dogs can kind of be a detriment. Like if they're out in front of you and they encounter a grizzly bear and they get scared, they run back to you and bring the bear back to you. Yeah,
absolutely. The bear follows them, and the next thing you know, you're on the ground playing dead and hope the bear quits pretty quickly. There's plenty of horror stories that way. A good friend of mine who's a log home builder, was attacked just that way. His dog led a sow with two cubs directly to him. The dog ran through his legs. He looks up, the bear hits him, and he's still going through cosmetic surgery to keep his nose and ears and some things like that repaired and over time. So it's a dangerous situation. You can laugh about it if it's not you. It's not funny if it happens to you, though.
Right. Well, obviously, with a fly shop as successful as yours, you have lots of clients fishing the Shoshone without being attacked by a bear.
Right. We've never had that problem. We've had bears come down attracted to our shoreside lunches when we pause for a float trip or a walk wade trip.
Sure.
We may haul out some pretty aromatic dishes for our clients, and bears will try to come and visit you. But we just prudently pack up and go somewhere else, so the bear is left high and dry, and we can eat in peace. But we've never had anybody get mauled or attacked or anything, and I just thank God for that. That's a good thing.
Well, that's a good track record. Hey anglers, if you're like me, you're always on the hunt for new trout streams to explore, but finding these hidden gems can be challenging. Well, not anymore, because there's a new app I highly recommend called Trout Routes. Trout Routes has mapped out every trout stream by state with detailed access maps for every stream. They have over 15 different map layers with hundreds of thousands of access points, color-coded stream ratings, public and private land, and more. Just this spring, I was in the driftless region of Wisconsin, and man, was it awesome to have the Trout Routes app on my phone to help us do some exploring. Trout Routes made it so easy to find new water and access points that we never would have known about. They also have local fly shops, the ability to take notes, and even local stream regulations, and you can download maps for offline use. Today, Trout Routes covers 25,000 trout streams in 34 states, and, big announcement, by the year end, the entire lower 48 will be added. So if you have an upcoming trip anywhere in the lower 48 or looking to explore nearby streams, I suggest you check out Trout Routes today on your Apple or Android phone. Don't leave home without it. Hey anglers, are you looking for a darn near perfect cup of coffee to start your day? Then do yourself a favor and check out anglerscoffee.com. That's right, Anglers Coffee is made by anglers for anglers, delivered to your doorstep, one batch at a time. They start with the very best coffee beans selected for their great flavor and responsible growing methods. Then each batch is roasted fresh daily. The result is a wide selection of roast styles that will satisfy the most discerning coffee lover. And now you can enjoy Angler's Coffee anywhere, anytime with the dry dropper single-serving coffee in a tea bag. Just add water. And this isn't your mother's instant coffee. It's a single serving of carefully dark-roasted, fresh-ground, and nitro-sealed coffee. A percentage of each sale goes to some great nonprofit organizations that directly impact the fly fishing community. So head on over to anglerscoffee.com to check out their great selection of coffee and the organizations they support. If you're not 100% satisfied, they'll give you your money back, no questions asked. That's Angler's Coffee. It's darn near perfect. So let me ask you this then. If someone was thinking about coming out to the northwest corner of Wyoming, obviously Yellowstone's a huge attraction, but here you've got the Shoshone River. And, honestly, it wasn't on my radar at all. And then I started hearing about this. The more I talked to guides in Montana, people were saying, I've heard it's pretty darn good fishing over there. And I'm wondering if you could kind of tell the listeners here, what is it about the Shoshone that you feel like really makes it such a world-class river?
Well, it's going to take some time to tell you that, Steve, but I will tell you this. The North Fork is unique in many ways. It looks like a classic West Coast steelhead river in a lot of respects. It's got these huge, long runs that are deep. They have lots of boulders. Fish can hide in there. It's got a lot of stonefly, caddis, and larger mayfly species that live in there. So the fish have access to the nymphs. They have access to the emergers, the adults, the spinners. The stoneflies, of course, are a great spring meal for the trout that are in the river spawning and doing that. But it's 50 miles along, from about 50 miles of fishable water that's near a road in a national forest. And once you leave the road, it's a very difficult river to negotiate. So it probably would. The Madison River has been called a 100-mile riffle. The North Fork is just 50 miles of plunge pools, great elevation changes in terms of river gradient. And so it's constantly got you on your toes. And every time you go around a corner, you just see more water to fish. And it's not like the Kings River and the Kings River Canyon, Sequoia National Park. It's not unlike the Trinity River in Northern California, which is a great steelhead stream.
Sure.
We don't have the major waterfalls, so the fish passage. We have great migration runs of fish. The fish are large. The average fish is probably going to be in that 16 to 18 inch range.
That's amazing. Can I pause you right there? That is amazing because you actually put that on your website. It's very rarely you see somebody sort of claiming fish size on a website, but you guys, that's brave. But you're really catching fish that big on average, huh?
Well, I hate to brag because as soon as you do, somebody's going to come out. It's like when I guided on the Bighorn River in Montana out of Fort Smith, the fly fisherman was telling people they could catch 100 fish a day, and they're all 16, 17 inches, and they were. But you have to be a good angler to catch 25, 30, 40, 50 or more fish per day per person. The North Fork certainly give that to you, but we have people that have been, we started with fathers and sons and now grandsons. So we have 3 generations of anglers that come to fish specifically the North Fork of the Shoshone during the peak season. That would be generally sometime after the 4th of July into October. It's floatable about 4 to 6 weeks of that time period. And then the rest of the time, it's a walk wade river. It's very tough to row, and you have to be really good on the oars. So we fish out of rafts. It's not a drift boat type river. And but they come back because the fish are solid 19, 20 inchers. They're very aggressive in the way that they attack a fly, whether it's a dry fly or a beadhead nymph or a streamer. They break 1X tippet, 2X tippet like it's kite string. It is a river that I fished all over the world, and this is the river that has always attracted me, and it's always the river that I compare other rivers to. And I'm 72 years old. I have had the opportunity to fish some pretty amazing waters, but the river has remained consistently the same for the 38 years that I've had North Fork anglers.
That's saying a lot right there.
Says a lot. And even though we're having kind of a rearranging of the western states from population, the limiting factors, grizzly bears, rugged terrain. It's not everybody's cup of tea to get beat up on a river. They like to, it kind of regulates the traffic just because of the type of fishing that the difficulty factor is there, and it's swift, it's cold, but it's got big fish, and that's the attraction. And if you're willing to take a chance on breaking a leg any part of the day, or slipping and cracking your head on a rock, or breaking an arm, or fly rods, which is not uncommon, it's the kind of river you always want to go back to because the fish just are amazingly strong.
My kind of river. And I'm looking at my Trout Routes app here, and I can see there's tons of access. Like you're saying, the road parallels it for a good way, and then all of a sudden it breaks off and kind of heads north, doesn't it? And then it's just all trails up that way. Is that right?
Yeah, that's pretty much foot and horseback up there. But the river fishes well from the mouth of where it runs into Buffalo Bill Reservoir all the way up to Yellowstone National Park. Middle Creek is a major spawning tributary, and that runs right past the east gate going into Yellowstone National Park. If you take a right turn away from the road and go north like you're talking about, you have another 15 to 20 miles of water that only people that are willing to brave the grizzly bears and walk in there or ride a horse in there get to see. And right now, if it wasn't elk hunting season, that is probably one of the better places to be because, well, the river gets much smaller in size, so it's a little easier to negotiate than it is as all the tributaries start to pour back into it as you go downstream.
Are the fish sizes a lot different as you get up there? I'm assuming they get a little smaller the farther up you go.
Well, in Middle Creek, yes. And the rest of the North Fork, no.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, there's 22 inchers, 23 inchers that are in there all the time. The Game and Fish says they all go back to Buffalo Bill Reservoir, but if they do, they go back when the ice has covered it up.
Yeah.
Sometime late November, mid-November.
And you've got cut bows in here too. I'm assuming, what are the fish that what are the ones that are really fighting hard for you? You think it's the cut bows, or you got browns and rainbows? And
Yes, the rainbow and the cutthroat. The Yellowstone cutthroat is the native fish in the North Fork. And back when fish were getting transported from the West Coast to the East Coast and vice versa, and then Germany with the brown trout and Scotland, the Yellowstone cutthroat dominated the whole east side of the park, all the way down to the Bighorn River, the Wind River, all the way up to the Bighorn River and Yellowstone. That was all Yellowstone cutthroat country. And as rainbow trout were reintroduced, the cut bow, the hybrid version of that, is what we call silver bullets. They're very silver in color. They have the hybrid vigor that you would expect, and they get very big. They get they're kind of a silver color, and they are the ones probably that pull off your line. You go into your backing. They break your leaders.
heck yeah,
They're very, very, very aggressive fighters. They don't quit, although we do try to land them as quickly as we can so we don't overstress them. But they're the ones that are probably, of all the fish, they're the ones that get bigger than their their native cousin, the cutthroat, or their relative, the rainbow trout. But again, 16 to 20 inch fish is nothing to sneeze at.
yeah, I'd take those all day long. Real
Yeah.
screaming cut bows. The only fish I can think of, the only trout I can think of ever took me down to the backing was a cut bow, and I caught that in a high mountain lake in Montana a couple years ago. But yeah, they're amazing.
Yeah, cut bows are very, very strong. And we fish two fly rigs here. We haven't, we fish a lot of hopper dropper patterns come when the stoneflies are on the water. So we've got a big stonefly with a bead headed nymph, usually a North Fork special or some big soft hackled version or rubber legged version of a stonefly nymph. And it's not unusual to have two fish on at the same time that are in the 2.5 to 4 pound range, and they're both going different directions while you've got them hooked up on your at the end of your leader.
That's a problem.
It's an interesting problem to have.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Wait, and you were talking about 1X. Are you really fishing 1X for these guys? Does that work on the Shoshone?
Well, we recommend it. A lot of people don't believe us until they get one of those big guys hooked up on 4X and 5X, and they watch about $6-7 worth of flies disappear on the first run. And when they've gone through 2 dozen of those, they finally figure out maybe North Fork Anglers was right about this, and
maybe they know what they're talking about.
We have to convince people. They don't believe us any. Well, we land them on 6X back home all the time. It's like, well,
not these fish.
Number one, you're in a tailwater. Number two, they're hatchery fish. And number three, the river isn't dropping from 9,000 feet to 5,000 feet in about 50-mile distance. So
yeah, right. So you got current too to deal with.
Yeah, current, rocks, trees, submerged, anything that can take your leader, and the fish itself will break you off. You don't have to be drugged through the riprap to lose them.
Yeah. So, all right, 1X though. So are you talking about like 1X to your hopper and then something else dropping down to a nymph, or what's your setup?
Well, we have 2 ways. We fish nymphs under an indicator, until the fish really start to come up on top once the flows have dropped a little bit at the end of the spring runoff period. Pre-runoff, though, we're still fishing 1X and 2X, and if you can get your tippet through the eye of the fly, that's what we recommend. Right. Yeah, drift isn't really mean much when you've got weighted flies hanging below an indicator because they're all going to the bottom because of gravity and current. But what really matters is what happens after you set the hook. And so, yes, we don't go to 4X until sometime in late September when the flows are down enough that the fish really don't want to run far. They just want to get away from you. And then we can kind of land the bigger fish on 4X, but it's not guaranteed. It's not guaranteed.
Right. So when the water is, low and clear in the summer, or maybe this time of year, are you still using a 1 and 2X? Or are you going down to 4X?
Oh, we'll go 2X to 3X for pretty standard 2 and 3X. 4X, if we're fishing, if we have to match, like we get a hatch of Paralepta flebias, about the 1st of September to the mid part of September. It depends on every year, but they're about a size 14, and the fish really like a size 14 bead-headed nymph of some kind that's either dark olive, or black, and or tan. And then we sometimes are forced to use 4X on that, but 4X again is 6.2 pounds
Right.
for an average breaking strength. As long as you don't reef on that fish, you could probably land him. But when they take the fly, they're so aggressive that if you're aggressive on your hook set, the fly is in the fish's mouth. He's jumping away from you, and you're shaking your head and tying on another fly. So
Okay. So Tim, are the fish, they must not be super leader shy in general, but are they selective too or not?
oh yeah, I mean, a cutthroat is noted for eating dry flies. I mean, that's why people give them a bad rap, is because they sometimes can appear to be too easy to catch. But we have close to 2,000 miles of rivers and streams that drain the east side of the Absaroka Mountains on the east side of Yellowstone National Park. And a cutthroat can be very, very fussy about what they eat. The rainbows can be, the brown trout certainly can be. And
Sure.
so it's sometimes you have to make sure that you're giving the fly to the fish the way the trout wants to see it. So even though they're not leader shy specifically, heavy
Yeah.
tippets really do affect the way that certain flies drift. So instead of fishing upstream, which would be the traditional eastern way, upstream and down, you've got all these currents that are pulling your line and your leader around. So they're very sensitive to movement. They're not sensitive necessarily to that leader, but they're very sensitive to the movement. And I've said for years, going back decades, that there is not a trout in the world that will not run away from a fly that looks like it's chasing it. A streamer would be the only exception, and you're not really chasing that. That fish is seeing the fly go away from it, not going toward it. So there's a difference in that. And so on guided trips, particularly when I'm with people guiding, we really work on setting up good drifts so that fish doesn't see anything but the fly first. It's not
Okay. So
seeing leader, it's
downstream.
not seeing a V or a drag. There's nothing that's going to impede that trout's reason to either come and take it for a dry fly or to eat it as a nymph. It's not being chased by that fly. And I see a lot of guys that, they tell me how good of anglers they are, and I can tell you in 3 or 4 casts whether they're good anglers or not, just by the way they set up that first presentation before we have a discussion about, well, maybe you want to do this or you want to do that. And mending is really critical on really fast water. You've just got to stop that movement. If you want to be successful with dry flies, if you want to dead drift nymphs, if you want to pull streamers, I think that's why a lot of guys fish streamers, is because they're not good enough to really be successful fishing check nymphing or Euro nymphing or fishing faster water. Even with an indicator, you've got to remember your indicator is going slower than your flies are underneath it. So there are just so many different variables that go on when you're fishing alone. And when you're with a guide, you're a little bit nervous because you're waiting for that truth bomb to come out of his mouth. It's like,
Yeah.
we need to work on some things in order for you to catch some fish today. And you're not there to hurt somebody's feelings, but they're there and hired you to catch fish. They didn't hire you to look at the scenery necessarily. So
Yeah.
between looking at scenery, looking for grizzly bears, and watching a trout take your fly. There are just so many things you have to pay attention to, and those freestones that tumble, they move. There's 15, 20 different currents coming to you or below you, and you just got to pay attention to all that while you're fishing. It's automatic to us because we fish it all the time, but it's foreign to probably 90% of our clients. Even though we see them year after year after year, we still have this process. It's like, well, remember last year when we were fishing the same kind of water? Do you remember what we had to do to catch fish? It's like, no, I haven't fished since I saw you last year. So then we go through the protocol all over again. And again, I'm not being critical. Guys like myself are very blessed to be able to fish as much as we do. And that's how we get our reputation, is because we make it look easy, but it's because we have this learned automatic behavior that sets our fly up right from the get-go, that you have to teach yourself in the course of the day. If we have you for 2 or 3 days or a week, you're going to be really good by the end of the week. But the first couple of hours, it's going to be, gee, man, this thing's just kicking my fanny. What am I doing wrong? Why aren't I catching fish? You go out there, you hook one right away and hand me the rod, and I don't hook any for an hour. It's like,
what's the deal? Tim, let me ask you this. Is it a skill? I imagine it's a bit of a skill as a guide to be able to give your client, I call it the F word, feedback, in a nice way, so that you don't, ruin the day for the guy, right? Is that a bit of a skill?
It's one of those things that has to become a learned behavior. And we know that a lot of our guys and gals too, gals are really taking on a huge part of the fly fishing scene now.
Yeah.
But it's not about how strong you are or about how smart you are. It's about how well you can make your fly line and leader and tippet and your flies perform once you get them on the water. So we try to carefully instruct you in a way that doesn't damage your ego. Because, but when you hear the word mend 1,000 times, but you're not understanding what mend means, then you have to have a meaningful conversation. You don't want to hear mend all the time. You want to know why and what makes the difference. And then you have to be able to demonstrate it so that they can see that. And that's very hard to do in slow motion, so everything's happening real time while you're trying to get them to understand something as simple as a 4-letter word that means adjust your fly line on the water, but keep your fly from moving. Just set it up so that everything works good so you can catch more fish. And thankfully our fish, are accommodating, and they'll forgive you for making a mistake, and you'll still catch fish, but you would catch more if you could get some of the dynamics of the cast and the presentation down. But if I give all the secrets away, I wouldn't have anybody come guide with us anymore.
You wouldn't have to stop at the shop, would they? Well, now, Tim, let me ask you this. You mentioned a little bit earlier, and hopefully this isn't giving away your secrets, but that positioning was really important, right? Like, and you could tell in a couple of casts how, good that angler was just by how he got himself set up. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because if you want the fish to see the fly and the fly only first, there's a couple of different ways I can think of to do that. But could you talk about that a little bit?
Well, tell me what you would do first, and then I will talk about that.
Well, I mean, you could fish downstream would be one way, or you fish and you mend so that your line is off to the side and the fly is kind of off, you kind of bend your cast to the left or right. So, that leader's there, but it's off to the side and the fish isn't seeing that. Those are two ideas I have.
Yeah.
How'd I do?
Well, one of the things that we have to pay attention to all the time, not so much when you're floating in a boat in a slower moving piece of water, like, for instance, the Bighorn or the Missouri, or some of those waters that's flat. There's not a lot of different things that except along the shoreline that would impact your presentation. So in freestone kind of waters, which we fish predominantly on my side of Yellowstone National Park, we talk about drag and what drag does to your fly, and it either pulls it too quickly, or it sets up some kind of a deal that signals to the trout that there's something unnatural going on with that bug that they're eyeballing out there, whether it's a size 20 blue-winged olive or a size 4 salmon fly or a grasshopper or an ant or whatever. And so positioning, by when I use the term positioning, you can be 2 or 3 steps below a good trout lie, but if you, let's say the stream is running from your right to your left, and most people are right-handed casters. So they're casting upstream over their right shoulder, their fly hits the water, their fly line hits the water, but they're not paying attention to that loop that's starting to form under their rod tip.
Mm-hmm.
So even though they're picking their rod tip up or they're stripping fly line, they still have this foot or 6 inches of line that is going faster than the current, and it's coming under their rod tip. So that is changing how their fly is moving or drifting or 20 feet away, 30 feet away in front of them. And sometimes by moving upstream 4 or 5 steps or even 2 steps and making that cast again changes that line coming under your rod tip so that it's not, your drag isn't starting right away. You can do an upstream mend. You can lift your rod tip and hold it up so that you can lay your line to the side, generally upstream, so that you can slow down that line and current movement. Those kinds of things are the things that we talk about. The other thing, you said fishing downstream. So if you have 2 or 3 currents between you and the lie that you see the trout you know is good holding water, we show people how to do either a long roll cast mend to get the line above the fly so we can land in that target and drift down through there without 3 or 4 different heavy currents catching that fly line and pulling all that out of there and spooking the fish. Or we use what's called a reach cast, and we cast toward the target and then we reach our line upstream, drop the fly into that bucket or that long slick, do a downstream mend so that you throw slack into that line so you can get 4, 5, 6, 10 feet of drift out of there before current and everything else catches up to that, and you can't mend anymore. You just have to let it go past the fish. If it hasn't eaten the fly at that point, then we set it up again. We might wade forward a step or 2 to take that line pressure off if it's possible to do so. We might move to the right, 2 or 3 feet to change that angle to the dangle there so that your trigonometry, your geometry, everything works so that it all goes down according to the plan. So and generally those are where the big fish are. They can't be caught because there's all this stuff between them and
tough spot.
Or another predator. So you just have to, interpret all that and then get your client to do it. Or if you're fishing alone, you have to generate that cast so that drift is as natural as can be. And usually the reward is almost immediate. You get a take, whether it's a hopper with a dropper or a dry or an indicator rig. When it gets into that zone and you can slow that thing down to where those fish can pick it up and you can see it stop your line or you see it eat your fly, whatever, then you've got a hook set. You've accomplished what you've tried to do. And I think that's the most exciting part about fly fishing. There's so many different variables that have to be addressed in one cast. On every cast, all these things have to be applied, thought through in a nanosecond, and then accomplished. It's like throwing a Hail Mary. Every time you put it out there, you just hope somebody catches it.
It's worse than a golf swing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And I can't tell you how many times I thought about my golf swing and watch it go errant.
Yeah. I quit playing because of that.
If it was a boomerang, it'd come straight back to me.
Yeah.
So
I'm a lot better golfer or fisherman than I am a golfer. That's for sure. I quit that game. Oh my gosh.
Right.
All right. Well, you said a roll cast mend, and I'm trying to visualize what that is.
Well, it's very hard to teach this, but if you can visualize this for just a second, you cast your line out onto the water, and you feet immediately give slack under your rod tip. Your tip goes forward to make the cast, and
Yep.
then you lower your tip and drag some line back quickly so that your tip
Okay.
comes back behind you a little bit. It just has to go 45 degrees. And then you quickly push your rod tip over the line that's slack and roll that line forward. And then once you've released all that pressure on the line, then you can do an upstream mend or a series of those to keep that line going downstream towards your target. It's very difficult to do on an upstream cast because, again, you have this current that has snagged your line and is trying to pull your line under your rod tip. By the time you get your rod tip back to make that roll cast forward, you're literally roll casting the whole rig forward. You're not just taking that extra line and rolling that forward so you can make an adjustment by lifting the rod tip and laying the line over, or just continuing to do little roll cast mends to keep that fly drifting slowly through that part of water that you want to cover.
Yeah. Okay. You're moving some line with a roll cast, getting ready to mend.
Yes, but you're not actually moving everything. You're just moving a short section of line, well, maybe 9 feet of it under your rod tip. You're just adjusting,
Oh, interesting.
moving that forward so that you're not moving anything else but that short piece of line, but you've just eliminated all drag on your line at that point.
I see.
It's
Yeah, it's neat.
yeah, the roll cast mend is very critical here in this country. We use it. Well, we use it all over, but in heavy water, even a 3 or 4 weight line gets moving very quickly. So
Right.
you have to a 5 weight forward. I like some of these universal tapers that we have now. Like the infinity tapers on the scientific anglers, the presentation, precision tapers on the reel lines. Those all roll cast very well because they're not so heavily weighted forward. They taper back like an extra 10 feet. You can really roll cast that, and but you're not pushing hard enough to turn that roll cast over 30 feet away. You understand what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
You're
yeah.
just you're
Yeah.
just relieving the pressure that would be under your rod tip, which would then influence. If you didn't remove that, it would pull your fly right out of that target.
Okay.
So you'd be forming a U downstream if you didn't do that roll cast mend. You're just trying to get that drag from turning into a U shape and letting just your leader and your fly line go straight down instead of being pulled across and out of the pocket.
Tell me, what is the story behind how the North Fork got a top 10 rivers designation? How'd that come about?
Well, Neil Streaks has written a lot of books about the Rocky Mountains, a lot of the rivers in the Rocky Mountains. Of course, he's from Montana, so he's written about those more than others. But he used to come to the Orvis Company. He was a representative for them. And we had what is called the Orvis Guide and lodges, and it's called the OGR, or Orvis Guide Rendezvous. And from the late 80s until 2006, this rendezvous was held in Cody, Wyoming. And so, with all the people that come, and they came from all over the United States, they came from Europe, they came from the tropic areas. The saltwater guys would come up because April is a good time to be here, and they always had the rendezvous in April. And it's pre-runoff, but the fishing is good. And so, Neil has a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge. So he gave the North Fork in one of his pieces that he wrote, and I don't know which magazine. It could have been the Orvis News. It could have been in Fly Fisherman Magazine or any of those others that were out a long time ago, and just called it the top 10 rated freestone stream. It's one of the top 10 rated. The other one would have been, I think the Gallatin was in that one as a rated freestone stream.
Okay.
There was, some others in Idaho and around and down in Colorado, like Frying Pan. some of those that don't have it, like the Arkansas, Upper Arkansas. So there were
Sure.
freestones that he compared all of these to, and he ranked it in as one of the top 10.
That's
And
awesome.
so it's we've used that, we captured that. I did, and I don't think it's, if you talk to people that have fished the North Fork, I think it would probably be the top 1 or 2 freestones,
Yeah, probably.
the Rocky
Yeah,
Mountains.
sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's a beautiful river. It can kick your fanny though any given day of the week if you're not paying attention.
You were telling me before the show that Orvis quit doing the rendezvous out there. Why? Tell us why that was.
Well, I'm guilty as charged on that. We we would tell people, man, while you're here, you need to fish the North Fork, you need to fish the South Fork, of the both forks of the Shoshone River. The tailwater that runs through town is the culmination of those 2 rivers, and it fishes really good, but it fishes like a freestone, not a typical Rocky Mountain tailwater. And so these guys would just disappear, and they would be gone for hours, and Orvis couldn't conduct any of their seminars. If they did, they were conducting them to Orvis employees that they flew out there to be part of the program, while all the guides and outfitters that were there, including some of the higher up Orvis vice presidents and presidents, were fishing too. So nobody was showing up for seminars. They were all fishing. So Orvis decided, well, maybe we ought to move this rendezvous around a little bit. So they went to Casper, Wyoming. They went to Bozeman, and for the last, I think, 8 or 9 years, it's been up in Missoula, Montana, for the most part.
Okay, some good rivers up there too, but that's kind of funny that people just weren't coming to the seminars. Yeah.
Clark Fork, there's a lot of good water up there too.
Oh my gosh. Well, let me shift gears for a minute because I'd love to hear a little bit more about your background. It sounds like as a kid, maybe you might have been kind of a trout bum as a kid with all the fishing you used to do.
Well, I have to blame that on my dad. My dad was a fisherman, and so, he was going camping, so the family was going camping, and Dad loved to fish, and we fished the Sierra Nevadas, of course, growing up. I grew up outside of Bakersfield. I put Bakersfield in my bio because people know that town, but I grew up in a little bitty oil town on the west side of the San Joaquin Valley called Taft, and it's my alma mater, high school alma mater, and a great place to grow up. But we spent all of our time on the Kern River, generally up above what is now the wild trout portion of that. We had golden trout, we had the Kern River rainbow, we had the Little Kern River rainbow plus the golden trout. So, and they were wild back when I was a kid. And we would spend, once Little League was over, sometime just before the 4th of July, we would spend most of the summers until Labor Day up there fishing the Kern and its tributaries. And so, yeah, I grew up kind of a trout bum. I'm not going to tell you I was a trout bum, though, until probably 12, 14 years old, and certainly after I got an automobile. But what I did get tired of eating trout for every meal. And that was a part of the deal, is Dad would catch a limit, and he expected his boys to catch a limit. I had 3 brothers plus myself, and none of them had an interest in that. And they, I think they... You
mean in eating the fish or catching a limit?
Both. But they would eat the fish, because if you didn't, you were going to go hungry. But it kind of became one of those things where I just told my dad one day after I'd caught a golden trout. It wasn't very big. It might have been 7, 8 inches maximum. And I had an automatic reel, one of those old automatic.
I remember those. Yeah.
Martin, where you hit a button and everything just zips to the end of the line.
My grandfather had one of those.
Yeah. And the Upper Kern River tributaries are mostly pools that have been carved out by big glacial boulders and just rolled around until they dug deep holes in the creek bed out of granite, and they fill full of water, and there's trout in every one of them. So I'm fishing one of these potholes on the Upper Kern River, and I hooked this fish. I'm pretty sure I was 10 years old, And I watched him go from out of the stream to the end of my fiberglass fly rod in about a nanosecond, and he's stuck right at the end of my fly rod tip, cross-eyed, looking at the hook that's in his mouth and me. And I'm thinking, I just don't want to eat any more of these guys anymore. And by the time I got him unhooked, he was dead. So I put him on a stringer, and I went back and I told my dad, I'm not killing any more fish. I'm not going to eat any more fish. I'm just done with this whole thing. And he said, well, I guess you're not going to be a fisherman then, are you?
Oh, really?
And, well, I guess maybe I'm not going to be. But to take a little bit more time, I was thinking around damming up the creek. And I forget, it might have been Dry Meadow Creek or Noble. There were a lot of creeks up there with fish in them. And so my brothers and I are damming up a creek so we could keep the fish, between a certain point A and point B. And if we did decide to fish, they couldn't go anywhere because we got them trapped in between these two rock dams that we would build on and tear down all the time. So I see this guy fishing, and he's casting a fly rod, which is not unfamiliar, and he's catching fish, and he's picking them up and taking the fly off and dropping the fish back in the water. So I go up there. I'm pretty precocious at that age, and I say, "Hey, mister, you're what are you doing? How come you're not keeping those fish?" He goes, "Well, I don't like to eat them." And I said, "Well, I don't either." And I said, "Well, how come you're not hurting them?" And of course, we fish bait we're fishing flies. We used a fly rod when I was a child, and then we would use bait like Velveeta cheese or worm
on the fly,
something on the end of the fly rod.
Oh, really?
Because it was so brushy, you couldn't really, fish it unless you just dropped your line in the water and just let the bait drift with the current. And he's casting. He's standing out in the middle of the stream fishing and having a great time. And so I asked him how he did that, and he explained to me that with flies, you only have one hook and you don't have any bait on there, so you don't have to stink and smell bad and pack all that around. And he says, I mash the barb so I just don't hurt them. And I let them jump a few times, and then I turn them loose and come back and catch them again.
Catch and release.
And it's like, wow.
How about that? What a concept.
Yeah, he offered, catch and release. That's the first time I'd heard that. And this is 1960, 61.
60. Wow, no kidding.
Yeah. And so, well, anyway, to make a long story short, he asked me if I wanted to try it. Well, I said, yeah, man, if I don't have to eat them, I don't mind catching them. And if I'm not killing them, I don't mind that either. So he gave me a rudimentary introduction to fly fishing, and I managed to catch a few fish along with bushes and slapping the water and, all the things you do when you're learning to fly fish. And so I got the bug then. By the time I was 14, I was trying to figure all that stuff out. And, well, here we are, all these years later.
There you go. Tim, how did you end up in Cody, Wyoming, and starting this fly shop?
Well, I worked in the oil industry for a while from the time that I was in my early 20s until my mid 30s. But I'd been hired to go get an oil company out of trouble in Illinois, and the California fisheries were really turning into stocked fisheries. They were kind of losing some of their allure to me. So by that time, in the early 70s, I lived in Fresno, fished the Kings River a lot, did that kind of thing, and joined Federation of Fly Fishers, fished up there, did a lot of things. But the oil industry was paying a lot of money to people when that oil crisis hit in the early 74.
Sure.
My dad was in the oil industry. He told me you can make a lot of money. You could do really good at this if you applied yourself. And so I did. I still fished. I carried a fly rod everywhere I went. It took all my customers fly fishing. But so I got hired to go to Illinois, and I moved my family there. Figured out that Illinois was not the fly fishing mecca of any country, let alone the United States. And spent 18 months there working on a project for a major oil company, got them out of trouble, did what I was supposed to do. Thought, well, man, I don't want to move back to California, but I would love to get to the Rocky Mountains. And, it's funny how things work in your life. And without being too philosophical, I just think God, I was unhappy where I was at. I solved a problem, but I really miss fishing. And, I fished Missouri's trout parks. I wasn't that far away from those. And I tried smallmouth fishing and largemouth bass stuff, but I really miss the mountains. So I get a phone call in 1981 from a guy that knew my dad really, really well. He was located in Houston, Texas. He goes, hey, he says, I would like to go to Wyoming. I've got a job I'd like for you to do. And it's like, well, where in Wyoming? And he says, well, you can live anywhere you want to. And I go, really? He says, yeah. He says, listen, he goes, no pressure. I've got a plane ticket. I'm sending you a plane ticket in the mail. He said, this is, back in the early 80s. And he said, come on down to Houston. We'll talk about it. So I said, okay. So I flew down there. We had a talk. And he says, I've got a project in Casper, Wyoming. He says, I think it's something you can do. And we've got this new company. We'd love for you to work for us. We'd love, we'll pay you good money. We'll move you out to Wyoming, whatever. So I flew out to Casper, Wyoming, and the Platte River had just really been stocked with fish, the North Platte. It wasn't on my radar. The Madison River I already knew about. The Henry's Fork I already knew about because I'd fished those before I went to Illinois. And so I thought, well, man, that's a long ways from the Madison. So, but I flew into Casper, checked out the situation there, and thought I'd been shanghaied to Bakersfield. In fact, I asked the airline stewardess, it's like, excuse me, I go, I'm supposed to be in Casper, Wyoming. This looks a lot like Bakersfield, because when I flew over it, it's like, holy cow, this is not unlike Bakersfield. It had some mountains around it, but it really looked like desert to me, and a lot of oil wells. She goes, no, sir, you're in Casper, Wyoming. And when I stepped off the plane and was introduced to that wind, I knew I wasn't in Bakersfield anymore. But it was October 81, and I'd already fished the park with a customer of mine before, so I was very familiar with Yellowstone and a little bit familiar with Cody, Wyoming. So I asked this guy, are you sure I can live anywhere I want? And he goes, yes. So anyway, Cody, Wyoming became my home, short version.
Yeah.
And fished the North Fork, fished the Clark's Fork, and I knew that I was where I needed to be. And, I just had these doors just open up, and the oil industry was kind of slowing down by 84. By 84, I'd already decided that I was going to, I started teaching fly tying and basic entomology at the adult level for the community college close to Cody. And by 84, I'd opened a guide business already and put out a catalog, and it was North Fork Fly and Tackle at the time. That's how I did it. And over the years, the rest is history. So
let me ask you this. Since 84 to today, man, that's a long time. What has sort of kept you at this for so many years?
Kept me in Cody, Wyoming?
Well, just doing the fly, owning a fly shop and, just doing what you're doing.
I have to be careful how I say this, but I was very blessed. I had the money to do what I wanted to do. And, I could afford to do that. So I did that. It was a dream of mine. It was the desire of my heart. I got it. It was given to me. And I have tried in the last almost 40 years now to take what I know and extrapolate that into other people and share with them all the things that makes Cody, Wyoming great, all the things that make the trout streams up here worth saving and protecting. I'd already gotten involved prior to that in California in the restoration of the Kings River, which really was It's a wild, beautiful, wild river, and I'd worked with FFS there, so and I grew up fishing, so my passion, all through college was to fish.
So I've heard great things about Cody, Wyoming. Tell me about Cody. I heard it's a really cool town.
Well, Cody is, you know, it's a town that Buffalo Bill Cody started back in the early 1900s, and it was originally set up to be an agricultural community, ranching agricultural community, but because Bill Cody also was an outdoorsman and things like that, Yellowstone Park had recently been established in 1872, and then it was turned into a national park. And Shoshone National Forest was the first national forest. All of it within a couple of days ride by horses from Cody, Wyoming. So Buffalo Bill, because he was a showman, had friends that were railroad people, and he convinced them to build a railroad spur into Cody, Wyoming. He just built a Hermo hotel, and he wanted tourists to come fill it up and go to Yellowstone National Park. So Cody kind of has been a cowboy town, ranching and sheep ranching and cattle ranching and the sugar beets later on as the agriculture came to the area. We dammed up built Buffalo Bill Reservoir, dammed up the two forks of the Shoshone to form Buffalo Bill Reservoir. Cody was founded originally closer to the what they call Coulter's Hell, or the canyon of the Shoshone. As it comes out of the mountains, it changes from Shoshone to Shoshone, which means stinking water. There's
Oh,
hot
interesting.
springs there. And so, anyway, it went from a Crow Indian encampment to a nice little western town where people could come from back east or all over on a railroad car, get off, jump into those old coaches, automobiles, and wagons originally, and take a 6-week tour through Yellowstone National Park. And they would go right up the North Fork, go right over Sylvan Pass, go down by Yellowstone Lake, go to Lake Hotel, which had been built for people, and go to Old Faithful, do a big tour of the interior of the caldera, and then they would come back out to Cody. That they would also, the Harriman family, who
Yeah,
Harriman
Henry's
Ranch
Fork.
there on the Henry's Fork, right? They put a railroad spur in so people could come in from the west side, and then so West Yellowstone, all of that was accessible. People would come in that way. Then they put a railroad line in from Livingston, Montana to Gardner, Montana. So all of a sudden, we had all of the entries to the park where the passes where you could get into the park over a pass. All of a sudden, they became gateway communities, and so Cody's been a gateway community. Buffalo Bill, of course, is the legacy. He's the founder. He's the reason why Cody is here. But in the years since, it's become known as a premier outdoor recreation area. We have some of the best ice climbing in the world up the South Fork of the Shoshone in the South Fork Canyon, quality ice climbs. And people backpack to Beartooth, the Absarokas, Yellowstone National Park. We raft, we kayak, we do those things. The river that runs below the dam is, of course, it's great fishing. 5 minutes from my store in downtown Cody, you can go down there at any time, catch 20, 30 fish in a couple hours and come back and feel like you had a vacation and go back to work. So it's all good. And
Sounds pretty good to me.
yeah, man, it's a great place. I highly recommend it. Just come and visit and go back home, though. We have too many people moving in here already.
Don't stay.
So.
Yeah, don't tell anybody.
Right.
And I wanted to ask you before we close out the show, could you talk about some of the flies you develop, like the North Fork Special? Looks like maybe a little stonefly pattern. And what kind of are your top confidence patterns for the North Fork?
Well, I'll tell you briefly about the North Fork Special. That was designed on the Yellowstone River in the early 90s, Yellowstone River below the Hardy Rapids in that area on the upper Yellowstone. And by 96, I was having that fly tied commercially for me. And I designed it to represent stonefly nymphs and larger mayfly nymphs like green drakes, some of the clingers and crawlers that you see, Rithraginas, stuff like that were in all of the freestone streams inside Yellowstone and around Yellowstone, particularly on our side of the park. And over time, it turned into what it is today. I started that probably in 92, 93. By 96 or 97, the fly had been perfected. So the fly you see today is the fly that we've had now for quite a while. And it was originally tied in tan with a silver or gold bead to imitate your golden stoneflies, some of your March Browns, some of those, lighter colored nymphs.
Right.
And then the stonefly would imitate some of the darker mayflies and immature stonefly nymphs that inhabit our area. And so it's tied from size 6 all the way down to 14. And we have black and silver and gold and bead and tan body. That was the original colors. Now we have black with purple bead, black with red bead, black with hot orange. And then I have one that's called Spawn, which is hot orange with hot orange dubbing. And it's a great steelhead fly. It's a great pre-spawn fly or post-spawn fly for,
Okay.
And so it works really good. It's a great fly. It works all over the world. I hear people tell me it works in New Zealand. It works, all over Patagonia, Iceland for grayling, for brown trout in mainland Europe. So it's a good pattern to have, and I've of course adapted it to work for me for steelhead and salmon on the West Coast and things like that too. But
Okay.
Umpqua is the one that distributes it. And so I'm a signature tyer for those guys. It's one of our go-to nymphs here. Size 10 and size 12 are probably the two sizes that are fished the most because, anglers can turn that over under a hopper dropper kind of deal. And so the setups that we fish here we do have really good hatches, but the hatches are not what you would expect. They're freestone type bugs. So, early in the spring, we have March Browns, we have squala stoneflies,
Okay.
we have blue-winged dollies, and we have midges. Those are kind of our predominant, the latter two are our predominant diet from October until early April. And then March Browns come, squala stoneflies come, golden stones come, Pteronarcis or the salmon fly stoneflies are out. And we have a few cream-colored mayflies and a little bit of green drakes that come just before the water blows out in June. And then once the runoff is over, the trout still remember the stoneflies, so we fish a lot of large attractor patterns. My Ho Candy is one that's very popular. It's an improved, glorified Madam X pattern that I developed here. Then I have my all the time AT&T Caddis emerger, which is a bead-headed soft-tackled emerger. Works really good on our freestone and our tailwaters locally. And bow tie midge, we fish a lot in lakes. It's a midge emerger. So I have a lot of patterns. I don't know that I could tell you about all of them, but the North Fork Special is probably the one that is the most well-known just because it's so effective everywhere people try it.
Any other confidence patterns you'd recommend people check out?
If you're looking for bead-headed, are you talking about nymphs or what are you talking about?
Oh, just anything. If I had a box of flies, what would you for sure want to have in there?
Well, if you had a box of flies and you were coming to Cody, Wyoming, I would tell you to make sure that you had, some kind of a large dry fly that would be either a good alternative for a hopper and a stonefly imitation. You could make that work. Turk's tarantulas, my Ho Candy, my Horror, which is just a natural deer hair version of it's not gottied up like the Ho Candy. That's why I got the name Ho Candy. But Parachute Adams, Gray Drakes, Royal Trudes, Royal Wolves, those are in sizes 8 through 14.
Okay.
And then you can do well with those. Elk ear caddis, we fish those, but we really don't fish those because our fish eat large. They want large bugs. They eat large bugs. So size 6, size 8, size 10 hopper patterns, chubby chucks are great, particularly in gold and purple and red. Those are great colors with rubber legs on them. Your stonefly nymphs would be girdle bugs or pat stone patterns that are weighted. And of course, my North Fork special is going to outcompete those. But if you want movement, when the waters get a little muddy from rain or whatever, girdle bugs and Pat's rubber legs and sizes 4 through 10 are really, really good patterns. And then you can fish soft tackles with a bead. You can fish a jig style. You can fish a traditional soft tackle with a bead, gray and purple, and pheasant tail are all 3 good variations of a soft tackle. And of course, your hare's ears, your pheasant tails, your copper johns. Again, sizes 12 through 16. You don't need to go really, really small on freestones.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a good list. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Streamers. I mean, everybody's got their favorite streamer, but if I was going to put 3 in the box, it would be a black woolly booger, a brown woolly booger, and an olive woolly booger.
Is that right? Okay.
You can catch a lot of fish on each bird.
When do you go black, brown, or olive? And what's the determining factor there?
You just try them until you figure out which ones the fish want. It seems like black is better early and late in the year, and you can get away with brown and olive. When the fish are just really looking for some color, color, they want to do something different. But black is probably the best all-around performer.
I got you. Okay. All right. One last question, Tim. I'm curious, what are there some great places for anglers at the end of the day to go have a beer and get something to eat? What kind of what restaurants would you recommend there in Cody or wherever?
Well, with COVID, we've had a really tough time keeping some of these restaurants open. But traditionally, people come to Wyoming to eat a steak. They want to eat beef, so we recommend the Cody Steakhouse. And we do have and it slips my mind at the moment, we do have a place outside of town that serves prime rib all the time. They put on a dinner show with a meal, and they serve prime rib chuck wagon style. It's a great little place. It's the name's slipping my mind, but the Chamber of Commerce can direct you there.
Yeah, sure.
And then we have the Proud Cut Saloon, which is really good cowboy cuisine. It's an old time bar. It's got atmosphere. It's a little tough to get into because it's not a big place. But the Cody Steakhouse just rocks. I mean, they've got great cuts of meat there. And you can also get fish and chicken if, you don't want to eat heavy. And good bar, good sports bar there. If you just want a good burger, some places to hang out, you have some home brews. Brewguards, BREWGARDS, Brewguards is a great place. It's perfect burgers. They're really good. They're affordable. And then we have a couple of other brew houses in town, but those kind of come and go with the season.
Yeah.
We have good Mexican food here. Zapatas is really, really good. If you want to drive 20 minutes, you can go to El Tapatio in Powell, Wyoming, and have a great authentic Mexican food over there. And then they have the Lamplighter Saloon, which is a nice 20-minute drive. You don't have to necessarily fight the crowds that you do in Cody in the summer. And I would tell you that you need reservations for all of those. And we also have Thai restaurants, some German food for if you like off-brow, that kind of stuff. We've got that. And
sounds like a hop in town.
Yeah, it hops in the summer. Our population about 10,000. We average probably 40,000 a day in the summer months from June until September 1st, and then it slows down a little bit.
Yeah, man, I got to get out there. I've never been to Cody. I've been to Yellowstone a bunch of times, but
you've convinced me. We have lots of water, 2,500 miles. We only talked about 55 of them.
Right, exactly. Plenty to fish. Well, thanks so much for being on the show, Tim. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure to talk to you and share some tidbits with your listening audience.
Yeah, for sure. And how can people get in touch with you or with the Fly Shop?
We tell them to call us. We still think that the personal touch is important to us. So call us at 307-527-7274. You can certainly reach out on our website at northforkanglers.com. we keep up with everything on there pretty well, except our fishing report in the summer. We're just too busy to keep up with that
Fishing.
every day. And I'll apologize in advance for that. If there's no changes, that's probably because everything is the same.
Well, I wish you extraordinary success in all your adventures to follow Tim. And folks, thank you for listening. And we'll be sure to post Tim's contact info in the Destination Angler show notes. And if he'll send us some pictures of those flies he was telling us about, maybe we'll stick those out on our Facebook and Instagram pages. You can DM me or email me with comments and suggestions at shag50@gmail.com. And if you like the show, please share it with a buddy. As always, our music is by our Brothers Fountain. Hope you enjoyed the show, and we will see you again soon. Tight lines, everybody.
Well, I'll go from the land to the shining sea. But I know there's more to life than what the eye can see.